I'm Larry Schlesinger here in Hawaii, and today we're going to discuss labiaplasty surgery and how we're going to do it and why we're going to do it and what we hope to accomplish. It's kind of interesting why people are even interested in that portion of the body because we haven't seen that before. It's not, your grandmother and your grandfather never saw it, never knew anything about it, and that's because of two things. One, there was lots of hair covering that neighborhood. And two, probably if your grandmother was kind of your average middle class, quiet person, they maybe saw their vagina, but they never saw anybody else's vagina ever. Well, that's not true anymore. Community standard has arisen that now tells us what looks good and what doesn't look good. And as far as the functional portion of it, women who have enlarged labia, if they ride bicycles, can actually be painful. Women who have enlarged labia can hang outside of their bathing suits, becoming very, very embarrassing. And if the labia minora are bigger than they should be, they can interfere with sex or become painful during sex. There are two basic techniques for labiaplasties, and by that I mean labia minora surgery. And the two techniques are the trim technique and the wedge technique. Now, the trim technique has been around for a very long time, and it's pretty simple-minded. What you're basically doing is trimming off the excess, the portion that sticks out. The problem with that is that the labia minora are very wiggly little things, and because of that, if you put too much tension when you pull up with too much tension and you trim it off, when it goes down, you're going to find out sometimes you've removed the entire thing, and so that's amputation of the labia. And the problem with that is the labia minora does have a function, and the function is to close the introitus, or the opening to the vagina. And when that happens, everything dries out. And the tissue, which is mucosal tissue, can become transitional tissue, and it's relatively rough and not very forgiving. The wedge technique was invented by Dr. Gary Alter of Beverly Hills. And Gary is a unique individual in that he's board certified in urology and plastic surgery, trained at the Mayo Clinic. And Gary, being a plastic surgeon who's done lots of surgery of all kinds, looked at the labia and said, that looks like a lot like an earlobe. And so he said, how do we make earlobes smaller? We take a wedge section out of it. So why don't we take a wedge section out of the labia? And that has turned out to be a fantastic technique, because if you want to take a bigger limb and a smaller limb, you can take little extra pieces out and make the two limbs equal. I like the wedge technique because there's really no scarring. You haven't interrupted the leading edge of the labia minora, and there's really no chance of total amputation like there is with the trim technique. Labia minora surgery takes anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on how many different little pieces there are in there. Very often there are extra little elevations that go from above the hood of the clitoris down to the labia minora portion itself. Sometimes they go down past it, and you have to remove these in order to get a nice clean look to things. The way I sew up the labia minora is if you picture the edge, you've got an outside that faces the labia majora, you've got an inside that faces the vagina, and you've got a middle piece. The outside and the inside I sew with chromic suture, chromic catgut, and that's very soft, so it's not pokey, it won't poke you. And those dissolve in approximately 8 to 10 days, and so at about 11 or 12 days, we pick out the rest. So all the sutures are gone between 8 and 12 days, and then because of the stitch itself, it actually looks like you've used the pinking shears, and there's lots of little bumps. And those bumps or indentations are gone within about 3 weeks. Recovery from labiaplasty surgery takes approximately 3 to 6 weeks. At 3 weeks, all of the sutures are out, and you can certainly go about any kind of activity except for swimming. At 6 weeks, everything's nicely healed. There's no problem. You can go back to intimate relations, and you can go swimming.